call to meeting to order at 4:08. Please join me in Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. The agenda. First item is public comments, but there is none. So we move on to correspondence. Any correspondence, Dion? No. Okay. The next item is the minutes of the special meeting Thursday, August 3rd, 2017. Can't believe it's been that many months ago. Everybody get a chance to review them? Have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion, minutes approved. Okay, at the last meeting, we were gonna look at, some, the schedule of the next year's meeting. So, let's see, we can have, is that on yours? Everybody else's? Behind, the agenda? Well, everybody has it, right? So it's the first Thursday of every month, so, does that work with everybody's schedule? So can I have a,
That feels about every day for me, so that's.
all right. A motion to approve the schedule? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Okay. So now we're on to discussion of the elderly tax abatement program. At the last meeting, we asked Ann and John to put together a schedule of the different towns and how they handle their programs. And I handed out a few minutes ago the schedule Ann put together. It has Bethel up on the top, and then it has some of the other towns she reviewed. So maybe Ann can just go through this and give us.
Trying to get
Around
all
what?
of the surrounding towns, but I didn't have a lot of success with some of them. But these are the ones that tax collectors responded to me, or I looked up online myself. And some of them do have asset restrictions, if you look at it. Weston, I think, jumps out because it's $1 million, including the home, minus the mortgage, which is a kind of a weird calculation for that. Shelton also has asset restrictions. Torrington I threw in there because they were the original one that I had been looking at, but they do not really have a local benefit freeze, like, a local benefit like we do. They have actually a freeze program where they freeze the taxes, and the limits are the same as the state limits. One of the things I noticed on a number of these, and some of them are not on here, is that a lot of these towns are asking for an affidavit, some of them being notarized. And I made some recommendations down at the bottom of what I thought we should at least look at. Does everybody want time to look at that? Or, my recommendations would be to change the annual review date. The review date is in November, but this year here, didn't get the information from the state until the very last week of November, and it was too late. The new Board of Finance was coming in, so I had requested that they table it until I could get the information from the state. And we used to get it in October, but it's later and later every year now.
And this year was a problem because of the budget too.
Yes, this year was a big problem because of the budget. So I think that we should maybe just have a review date prior to the next year's application period, and maybe not put such a firm time on it, which the application period is February through May. So
So would you do something in January then?
I would say that you'd have to.
Would have to be done before.
Before January 31st.
Right.
Yeah,
Before February 1st, January 31st.
yeah. I mean, actually, I would do it whenever I got it from the state.
Yeah.
I mean, if it came in November, I would bring it in and do it, because there's no reason not to. The program's over and the facts and figures are in, and, you know, the reason that we need it, though, is because our program increases by the rate of the state program, all the lower buckets. So if they raise Social Security, it's so somebody doesn't get bumped out of the program because their Social Security went up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm looking at this too. I noticed that several towns have a longer length of residency.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see why we can't change that. I mean, I don't think we wanna go like Sherman is.
15 years?
No,
No, Haddam, that's Haddam.
That's Haddam that has.
Sherman is 1 year plus 275 days occupiable.
Yeah, and Reading, I think it is, has got 3 years.
Yep.
I mean, and Brookfield is 5 years. I mean, I think 3 years is fair. I mean, we have a lot of people that move into these higher priced condominiums, and because there's no asset restrictions and they're not drawing off of their 401s, they don't have the income that other people have, and then they get the benefit right off the bat. And the intent, I think, behind this program always was to keep our Bethel elderly residents in their homes. I don't think 3 years is too much
Mm-hmm.
to ask. And
The tax status, I find interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, do we have recipients that are delinquent in their taxes?
Right now, no, but we
Okay.
have had them in the past.
Okay.
We've actually had a couple that have been seriously delinquent. But, I mean, it's something to think about. I don't necessarily, well, it's,
I think they should be current in order to receive a benefit.
the problem is, Bob, they're struggling. So I'd hate to take, I mean, I can always sell the property if I had to. You know, I'd hate to take away the benefit from them when they're already struggling
Mhm.
to pay. So, but I'm only one person here, so that's not, you know, what do you think
I
of
don't
that?
think it's a huge number, but.
It's not a huge number. It's
But
not.
you think about the exemption, it could be 60%, 75% of their taxes, not a dollar amount, but the percentage of their taxes. That net amount really should be something that they should be able to stay current on.
I agree with you. And there's many times they're hanging on for a kid, to
Mhm.
leave the house to a kid, you know, but it's not always the case. I think we need to look at adding asset restrictions, and the other thing I thought we needed to look at in light of the past budget season was somehow a cap or a trigger, just in case the state funding changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that the town is not left holding the bag, funding the full amount if the state backs away, which I think, you know, it may not be this year, but
They're gonna move in that direction.
I think so. I mean, look at everything else we see with the state. It's just another unfunded mandate.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you something, Ann, because I know you know more about it than I do. What about the towns that have the asset freezes? Are they getting reimbursed from the state?
The asset restrictions,
No, freezes.
freeze.
There's still some towns out there that what they do is they
Oh, the
they
local
freeze-
freeze?
yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
no state reimbursement.
so then that's coming out of their pockets
It's all out of
directly.
their pockets, yeah.
Because based on what you're saying with the cap, if we go out, our people get nothing. Not even from us then, right?
Well, no,
Well, we got that top little bit that's over what the state is.
right. We still have to fund it if they don't qualify for the state program. See, if they apply for our program here and they qualify for 60% off, and that 60% represents $3,000, and they're going to get $1,000 from the state
Right,
for being part of the state program, they're gonna get $2,000 from the town.
right.
If the state no longer funds, we're gonna have to fund the full 3,000 the way they want.
So we
That's
would
the
just
way I
limit
read
it to the town's part.
We would, you
Then
know.
we're the same money out of pocket.
Right, that, I mean, we could do that. You know, it's definitely gonna have an impact on those taxpayers, a huge impact, because, I didn't take out the names and addresses out of the program. I was gonna do that, I forgot. If I were to show you the numbers, you would see that some people get a significant amount. 75% off your taxes, you know, can be $4,000 or $5,000 for people, depending on where they live and what kind of home they have.
Now, when we looked yesterday at Monroe, they may have 75% not a reduction in tax, but they qualified for the 75%, but it represents a dollar amount too. What was
Well,
it, $750?
Monroe's
Off their
program
taxes,
is
period.
not like ours,
Right.
in the sense that their money is, I mean, if anybody wanted to take a look at it, the top part is what Monroe does, but they have a dollar amount associated with what they get. The same thing as Ridgefield. Ridgefield, people talk a lot about Ridgefield. Oh, everybody in Ridgefield gets it, but that's on here. Everybody gets the same amount, $1,048. Everybody, across the board, there's no tiers. This year here, it cost them $1,720,000.
Mhm.
That's a big number, huge number, that I don't think we wanna look at. Monroe, I don't have their number per se of what it cost them. It's something I could get, but they're.
But that 75% category, how much is that up there on the right? $1,500 in tax.
$1,500,
Whereas in
yeah.
our case, it's 75% off the taxes.
correct. There are towns that just have set amounts of money, you'll see. Manchester, it's $500 for single or $750 for married, that's it, that's all they get. You know, we have a percentage based on income that isn't really like any of these other towns.
Mhm.
You know, so we're looking at numbers that are always in flux every year. I mean, someone could qualify for 45% this year and then maybe lose some income, then next year or gain some income because they did better with dividends or something, and then they're up to 15 or 10%.
Mhm.
So it can change dramatically for people. And when it does change, you trust me, you can ask John, they're in. They're in immediately, because they understand, they don't wanna make the association of the fact that their income went up, but their benefit went down because their income went up. Like, we had one, I don't think you were doing it for me, I had one several years ago who cashed in a lottery ticket for somebody and put it on her taxes, because she cashed it in, she had to. And it just threw her income way over the limit, and she lost more than 50% of her benefit.
Mhm.
She was trying to help somebody who for some reason couldn't cash in their ticket themselves.
Yep.
So, John has some numbers as well.
Yeah, just one, I said I'd get for this meeting, but, last year we had 283 applicants. 193 of those provided federal income tax. So 90 were below incomes that required income tax. But you can see there's quite a high percentage that do provide the income tax. And I took a look at those who have rental income as part of their income. I've stripped out the names, but there's a number of rental units
They're all the same? Yeah.
The amount that they declared on their income tax for rental income, and then what they netted out at the bottom of the calculation worksheet for the amount that went on the tax as income or loss from the rental. And then what they qualified for in terms of dental benefits. There were two that were over the limit, so I didn't have complete detail.
Do you add back depreciation, or is this just net income or loss?
We add back depreciation, that usually doesn't have much of a bearing on it. These are just losses that get reported,
Yep.
except for depreciation, which would be an add back.
So the last one there, 2,459, the loss, that is net of the depreciation. That's an add back with the depreciation. So their loss was even bigger.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. All right.
I also took a look at the ones that had businesses, and quite frankly, I was expecting more that would have benefit from having a business and all the write-ups. They were frankly surprised me that there weren't very many in the category of having their own business, so
Mhm.
I don't think that's a big issue in terms of the program participation.
Okay. All right. So, going back to Ann's schedule, do we want to focus on a couple of the columns? I think we should consider some kind of asset restriction. Maybe residency. I think the tax status, I mean, I think they should be current. I know what Ann is saying, but, and then the benefit amount. Right now, we have a percentage off the taxes. Do we want to look into maybe doing a dollar amount instead? That's gonna make a huge change.
Oh, to be,
But the amount is factors.
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, Bethel benefit, the average Bethel benefit is quite significant for people. I'm gonna give you an average. What did we say there were, John?
283.
283.
183.
Well, should I add in the state benefit?
Let's just do the local.
Just do the local. The average is receiving 1544 of the local benefit. But that, keep in mind, you know, there's people included in that get only the 10%, so they're getting, you know,
Mhm.
sometimes $300 or $400 opposed to a significant number. Well, actually, I think I have it here, because you did this, John, the last time. This actually,
Those are just prior years behind them, so.
oh, okay. Yeah, this is this year. If you guys just want to glance at this, John did this survey of what we had of the percentage and what they were actually getting. So I don't have a copy for everyone, but I can make a copy if you want.
And I'm just curious, the average is 1,544. What's the high, what's the low? It sounds like the low is a few $100s, but what's the high?
Let me just glance at it quickly. I've got one for I've got one that's getting 6,164, so that's pretty high. 164.
Did I get this already? Not at the last meeting, I think. I thought we did. Yeah, we did. We got this last meeting.
highest one is about $4,800.
Oh, 48, not 6,000.
Not 6,000, that was the final tax. They have a very big part.
And the low would be about 300?
Yeah, I would say the lowest would be around 300, 385, something like that.
All right.
The problem is that if you go to a flat rate, which is really actually easier to handle, easier to do the spreadsheet and all of that, and, you know, it's just a flat rate. If you go with that, it's easier for us to work with,
Mhm.
but I think that you're harming the neediness of the taxpayers.
I agree.
Which is what this program was for.
Mhm. But it seems like the majority of the towns are doing a dollar amount rather than a percentage of the taxes.
Yes, yes, but keep in mind that I only looked at the local benefit program.
Mhm.
There are other programs out there. Some towns do freezes. The only reason I put Torrington on here was because they had an asset restriction on that freeze. But there are towns that, like, I believe Weston does all three, but it's the kind of thing, if you pick one, you're in that one, that's it. And you don't get anything more. You don't get any of the other programs that you might qualify for if you pick one.
Mhm.
Well, I don't think we should be looking at another program. I think we should just work with what
What
we've
we
got.
have.
It gets to be too complicated. But, you know, the one thing that I keep thinking about is, you're right, there's people that could certainly afford to pay the taxes in full, and if you want to say they're kind of abusing the program because they don't need it when they're taking money from other people. But at the same time, I'm looking at what's happening. I mean, everybody's being squeezed. I mean, because of the poor condition of our state, people are going to suffer. They've cut back on Medicare, they've cut back on Medicaid, the same thing in Washington. So, you know, my first reaction was when you talked about if we lose the state funding, yeah, okay, let's forget about that. But it's you know, for the people that really need it, that's unfair, you know? I mean, they didn't cause the problems in Hartford, you know, and they didn't cause the problems down in DC.
Mhm.
You know, and I just worry that, you know, by us trying to cut back and, you know, that what could happen is they're gonna be put in a really bad position, worse than what they have now, you know?
Well, the
and-
ones that really need it, I think if we
That's what I'm
instituted
saying.
an asset restriction, it's not gonna affect them.
Well, the problem with an asset of restriction is, how do you, I mean, what are you gonna have, sign an affidavit? Who's gonna
Well,
go out and
that's what-
look? Who's
Well,
who's
yeah.
gonna investigate,
Yeah,
you know?
no.
I
Well, you're
mean-
not, you probably won't.
You're not gonna be able to do that, you know, you're gonna have to depend on them, which is, we do have them sign a form. You know, it's just not an affidavit, you know, and it's not notarized or anything of that nature, and, you know, Bob and I talked about it a little bit too. I mean, John's way down here in the senior center, the town clerk's here. I mean, I don't want elderly people have to trot up to the town clerk either, I mean, you know.
So John is gonna get his notary stamp? and-
John could do that, you know, but, you know, it's just I'm just putting it out there, cause that's what I've found, is that some
Mhm.
towns want that affidavit, some,
Would you
know.
include the value of the house as part of the assets?
I mean, I think that's up to what this committee wants to do. I mean, there's a couple ways, there's two different
I
ones
mean,
on
you
here.
gotta subtract the mortgage
You've got,
if you
you
do.
know,
Yeah,
Weston
if there is
that
a
has that
mortgage. Yeah, but-
complicated formula, $1 million including the home minus the mortgage. And then Shelton has 200,000 excluding the mortgage. I mean, I do see mortgages for elderly, not very often, to be honest with you, but there are some that still have mortgages because they've helped their kids out, because everybody's struggling, as you said, and a lot of kids have moved back home, and then their struggles become the parents' struggle, and so I do see some of that, not all the time, but some.
There's been an uptick in reverse mortgages.
Mhm.
And, you know, Bob just said, if you're gonna include the house, you deduct the mortgage. I mean, how complicated are we gonna make this thing?
But
you
a
know? I mean,
reverse mortgage is not included in income,
No, but they're gonna have the cash from the reverse mortgage.
right?
Well, I shouldn't say that. The majority that I've handled, the people were already underwater, and by all this did was get them even.
Yeah,
You know, so there's usually not a lot of cash laying around.
But they may wind up taking a monthly benefit out of the
They
house
can,
too.
yeah, they can, or they can keep it like a line of credit,
Mhm,
Right.
mhm.
and then take it when they need it,
Right.
so. I don't know.
it's a
Well, if we
good
kept the
and a
house
bad
out of this
thing.
situation
Yeah.
and just, said 500,000.
See,
So that, then you capture the 401Ks and,
I thought that
investment money.
the program, one of the ideas of the program was to make sure they stay in their houses. So if you're gonna include that in the value, I think if it was me, I would exclude the value of that. But I'll tell you one thing I would do away with, the rental income. I would, if they have rental and they put down on their tax return that they took in gross $15,000, I don't care what the tax return says at the bottom line. That $15,000 goes on as income. I mean, just like Social Security, because some of the Social Security is counted on your income tax,
Right.
and some of it's down there, but it's not counted, but we count it. And I think it should be the same way.
Well, it's not all the money that you receive anyway, because you're paying for Medicare out of that.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But,
No, yeah, I agree with you that as far as the rental income, it's,
yeah, it doesn't seem right, that
well, and.
you've got another piece of property someplace, or even your own house,
Right.
and you're collecting rent, but yet, you get to write off all these items on it. I mean, they could have put in a swimming pool and try to write it off, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the two that had substantial rental income were over the limit anyway. In fact, most of the ones that are, let's say over somewhere around 18 to 20,000. Yeah, 18, 20, 41, 34, they're all over the limit. So the other, right?
yeah, but what I'm looking at is 50% of these that are listed, they all have losses.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Well,
it's more than 50%, I would bet. Well, maybe not, you got a couple down here that have, but,
we should start asking who their accountants are. I could use them.
Well, I have to admit, when you see somebody come in and like John said, there's not that many of them, but when you see those applications and they're all negative numbers, and one or two of them have some pretty big negative numbers, it's just like, what do you do with that? You don't know even how to process it to a degree,
Mhm.
because it's such big negative numbers. We just go back and add everything back in,
Mhm.
but,
Wow, look at this.
I'm looking at the one.
I'm looking at the very last one. 16,800 worth of rent.
So you had
Ended up with a
18,000.
loss of 2,450, and they got a 75% benefit.
Mhm.
So they made less than, how much is that?
Oh, for this year here, it's 17.7.
17.6.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, this last year was
I find that hard to
17.6.
believe.
Yeah,
Well, even if you added that back, they'd still,
yeah,
they might be in the 60% reduction category.
right, right,
You know,
right.
But
That
this-
struck me as one that was unbalanced in terms of what they were getting versus the income that was being generated.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Here's one with 3 rentals. 3 rentals, and they got a 30% reduction.
Mhm.
I think I know who that is. I'm not gonna say.
Is it possible to find out what other towns do with the rental income? I mean, I don't disagree with Marty on,
Well,
using the rental income like we do with the Social Security and picking it up 100%. Or maybe give them a flat amount in expenses.
I think a lot of the towns just straightforwardly follow,
Take the net on the adjusted gross
Yeah,
income and add back the
just-
Social Security.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And just so we're clear on the treatment of it, even though they have a negative rental income, that counts as 0 income on their application.
Right,
Okay,
But
so
still,
in the case of the last person, that 2459 is not reducing their income, you add it back. You add the 2459 to get the new number.
Well, it counts as a 0 deduction. They don't have a,
Right, right.
but they're certainly avoiding $16,800.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Which would definitely change the bracket they're in. Mhm. All right, let's,
What I'll do is, for next time, I will
summarize that, or?
take out the names and addresses, and then you can maybe look at the numbers a little more. Well, actually, you know what, do you have a pair of scissors, Dan? And a clip? Cause I'll just cut them off, cause I print this 1,000 times. At least you guys can, at least have an idea of the scope
Mm-hmm.
of what we're dealing with. When we were steadily raising the cap of the program, really primarily under the Burke administration, it went up several times, almost every year. The top tier went up because it was less than 40,000 initially. Thank you, Dan. Hopefully I got this lined up close enough.
You want me to go shred this?
Yeah, you can do that, or I can just take care of that. John has all, all right. So if you look at this, this kind of pretty much shows you, if you read across, I know, I'm sorry. We try to get it to small paper because it's.
So you can reprint that and just highlight that to print, just that section
Yeah,
without
I
the
know, I
names.
can do that. Yeah, if you look at the first one, that's a very good example of it. I can tell you right now that cause I know the person, that person there lives in Kingswood. She truly, though, even though it's a huge amount off, she's, widow? Yeah, she's a widow without any income other than what she acquired working for a very brief time because she had a husband and was never employed. So her income is very low. Oh, okay. So because her income's low, her benefit is high, but she lives in a very nice place, so, you know, there are.
So how does everyone feel about thinking about the different columns I mentioned before? And maybe making some recommendations on those? I mean, I think we were supposed to look at the program and then maybe make some modifications to it. And, you know, the asset restrictions, the residency, and the tax status might be something that we could present.
Bob, to me, it makes perfect sense, right? I kind of think about what our objectives what we might want our objectives to be, and I think first and foremost, right, it's helping those folks who truly
Yeah.
need our
Mhm.
financial assistance. On the other side of it, I think we want to make it so that the town kind of knows what it's liability, right? That the town doesn't have an open-ended liability.
Mhm.
And if those are our two goals, I kind of go through the suggestions, thinking, you know, an asset restriction probably makes some sense.
Mhm.
It really kind of works more to that first objective, making sure the person really or truly needs.
The person that really
financial
truly needs it,
assistance.
I think, is not gonna be affected by a restriction,
Right,
you know.
right. And I take Marty's point, you know, reverse mortgages can be unhelpful products, but if used appropriately, it's a way of monetizing equity in homes or other types of
Mhm.
assets.
Mhm.
Again, if we agree that those are our objectives, helping the people who truly need it, while also kind of making it so that the town knows what its liability would be, any suggestions that move us in that direction, I think we should think about.
Okay.
Again, asset restrictions seem to make some sense to me. Limiting the benefit, and whether it's a dollar amount or whether it's a percentage, but at least it's a known kind of quantifiable amount, so
Mhm.
the town can put it into its budgeting.
Mhm.
And-
I mean, you know, residency, I mean, if somebody's on a program and let's say, go to 3 years, but they're already on a program, they're grandfathered in.
Yeah.
All right, but someone new, you just don't want the situation where they're coming to Bethel because they're getting a better benefit, then they might be in another town.
Right, and that gets to that first objective, right?
Right.
If we're really trying to help the people who truly need the financial assistance, well, I think that's further modified by saying, help the folks who are Bethel residents who
Mhm.
need the financial assistance. So a residency threshold seems appropriate to me to be consistent with those
Mhm.
objectives. Again, if we agree that those are our objectives.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you, are those fair objectives?
Well,
It's a balancing without doubt.
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, when I look at the residency requirement, with a couple of real crazy ones, most of them look like they're a little over a year or so.
Mhm.
So,
Well, you got
here's
one at 3, one at 5.
183, 1 year, 6 months. Here's a 3-year, occupy 183, 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, 15 years, 1 year, 1 year. So it looks like most of them are probably 1 year or a little bit more already, so we're already in the ballpark.
Mm.
But I don't have any, if you're gonna grandfather the ones in, I don't see what the problem is then.
Mm.
What do we think about folks who have a 183-day residency? And that's kind of the minimum amount to be able to claim Connecticut as residency.
Exactly.
Usually it's on the flip side, right?
Yeah,
People
yeah.
want to be below that to avoid.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we think
It's-
that's enough? I mean.
And that's the snowbird thing, and the problem with that is I never really know when they go down or when they don't go down, when they're there, when they're not. I mean, if they're on public utilities, sometimes I can tell if they have a big water bill or not, that sort of thing. I don't think that matters much because I don't think people are gonna be honest about that.
Mhm.
I mean, we do look, part of our form has now on it addresses if you own other property. So that, when we get those ones, I usually try to look at where they are, call them, like if it's New York, they might be getting, New York has STAR program, Florida has a program. Florida's very, very strict. I get letters, probably maybe about 15 to 20 times a year, I'll get a letter from Florida that says, is this person receiving any benefits from the town of Bethel? Because their program down there is lucrative, and they get people that come from Connecticut down there or any other state, and they apply for their homestead that they have down there, and they will just wanna make sure they're not getting something in
Sure.
Connecticut.
The tax return that's reviewed, is that the federal tax return?
Mhm.
Do we ask for a state tax return?
No,
No,
no.
Because that would be a way of fleshing out whether or not folks have declared that they've been in Connecticut for 183 days or more.
there's 34 this past year that had property outside of their residence. But an awful lot of those are undeveloped properties in places.
Yeah, I was just getting to the
Yeah.
point, John, of, again, if our objective is to help Bethel residents who
Right.
are in the need of the financial assistance, well, that means they have to live here in Bethel, a way of not having to do all the investigative work of looking at phone records and traveling and that stuff. It's just to see whether or not they filed a Connecticut tax return. Because
Mhm.
that would be their declaring to the Connecticut
Well, if
government
they
that
have
they've been
to
here
fi-
184 days.
If they have to file.
Well, right, and if they don't have to file, that means they weren't here 183 days.
Or they
Well,
didn't
you're
meet-
talking
But
less
they-
income
yeah.
Or
numbers.
they might not have met the income
Might-
requirements
probably
either.
Many don't meet the income requirements,
Well,
yeah.
again, I guess you
Yeah.
can figure that out from the federal return, presumably.
Well, and they just don't have it, they come in with the social security and a couple bank statements, and that's it. Sometimes just the social security SSI form, just that one form.
Sure. Again, I'm trying to use those guideposts of help the people who really need it, Bethel residents, kind of keep the town where it knows what its liability is going to be. And so if the restriction is residency for a number of years and that we want to make sure they're here for 300, or well, let's say 183 days or more, one way of verifying that, one quote-unquote easy way of verifying that is if they file a 1040 CT.
Mhm.
What about, I'm trying to think in my mind, what's the basis or what would be the level regarding assets? And what kind of assets are you talking about? I mean, some assets aren't liquid, you know, I mean, and the other thing I'm thinking about is, you know, and I know we're mixing federal with local, but it is like the Bethel Housing Authority. If I remember correctly, they don't go by assets. They go strictly by income.
Income.
You know, and I don't know if you want to get tied up into that. That's all I'm thinking about. Just to be
Trying to think
consistent,
through that.
everybody's consistent.
And my understanding of it, and my understanding is not deep, is that it's harder to figure out what the assets are, so people
Oh,
go
yeah.
by income. It just, if we look at statistics, right, statistics would suggest to us the vast majority of asset wealth is in the senior citizen class. And so those folks may have lots of assets, but by virtue of not working, maybe they have a more limited income stream. And so again, it gets to perhaps, you know, are these folks who really, if they're folks who truly need the assistance, let's give it to them.
Yeah,
But if you see dividends on a return, interest is low, but, I mean, if you see any substantial interest, I mean, it may be,
yeah, you're gonna know they were stocks or bonds or
right,
something.
you know, and then,
Stocks.
all right, you know, we've never asked for the brokerage statements, but you could ask for the year-end statement on that. That's gonna show you the value of the portfolio, you know. And then, of course, you know, on a 1040, if they have a decent amount of investments, they may have tax exempt, and it's gonna be shown separately there, you know, so that's gonna be, and that's not taxable, although you pick up the tax exempt income, right, as income?
Yes.
On
Even though it's
tax
not-
return.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
so,
I mean, it's probably obvious, but the big buckets are 401Ks, IRAs, and annuities.
mm-hmm. Well, the annuities, you couldn't come up with a, you know, fair market value on that.
Right.
Yeah.
And John, is it the case that the folks who have retirement plans, are they not yet drawing down the required minimum distributions?
If they're drawing it down and it's huge, when the amount that they're taking out is big enough to affect their numbers. I mean, you know, the latest you can defer is 70 and a half, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Then you gotta, I forget what the percentage is. It's not a big percentage though that you have to take.
It's based on the actuarial lives, you know.
Yeah, it's not, but it's not, the first couple of years isn't very much.
It's very small, yeah.
So,
Oh, I'm looking here at Shelton's, and the only thing that they have in there is not excluding the value of real property located in Shelton. Taxpayers' remaining assets may not exceed $200,000 as attested to as in the signed application, but there's no description of what those assets are. So I was hoping for a little
Mhm.
more. There may be on, what was the other one? Westport.
well, that certainly would be the easiest way to do it, just throw out a number and say, if you meet this number, you're out.
You're out.
I mean, you know, I don't like, but I mean, other than that, otherwise you end up with another tiered system and trying to make percentages of
Right.
percentages, and,
Mhm.
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I certainly don't think we need to complicate it.
200 or 2.5, I think is small. That might capture some of these people, might throw them out, and you don't want to do that. But if you went to 500 or 750, you know, and they're not drawing down because they're only 71 or 72 years old, I mean, they have the money, they have the available funds to pay their taxes. And if, what winds up happening is, the other residents in town wind up supporting them, basically.
That's kind of right, that's my second guy.
And you could wind up having a family that has 2 or 3 children in the school struggling, and they're supporting the person that has $1 million IRA or 401K.
Well, that's what happened too with the cap on the program. It got to $48,000, and I just advised at that time not to raise it beyond the $48,000 because we have many employees here in the town that don't make that amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And we're giving that a benefit. You know, these are the people that are paying, some of them that are paying the taxes within town, and their income is not what we're giving away. to people that, you know, now they can't generate their income any longer, but they're not paying taxes on it either, on most of them, so.
Mhm.
It's a hard balance, because you do have to think about the person who is putting their kid through college or raising little ones that are still trying to pay their taxes against the ones that no longer have that income and are struggling to pay their taxes, so.
Mhm.
Is there, anybody have any thoughts about, the state funding? Like, right now, the program's capped at 0.75% of the budget. If it goes beyond that, I have never had to do it, but if it goes beyond that, I have to prorate the amount across the board to everybody. But my thought is, like you and I said, if the state funding goes away, right now, that's another, it's on the bottom of that thing I cut.
The last page.
The last page, I think it's 150, ours is 400 and something, the other one's 150 something.
123,000.
Oh, 123,000, yeah. That's the state funding this year, is 123,000. So, that definitely would have put us over the 0.75% of the capped amount. And the problem, once again, there is then you're taking it away from the neediest
Mhm.
person as well as the higher income one.
But if someday in the future that does go away, and we have to absorb it, we're gonna be,
Right.
we're gonna be readjusting everybody.
I think you're gonna see more than likely it's just gonna be lowered. Probably not disappear right away. I think what you're seeing is, like they're doing with everything, they're cutting back on everything. So I think that's probably more realistic.
Is
Mhm.
that
I
the
think.
lower?
The
I mean,
The
it's,
state will, yeah.
you know, it's possible the people that I've talked to are all people that are tax collectors or assessors or, you know, and we're not in that loop of no, it's just that, you know, this is what we suspect is happening based on
Yeah.
everything else that's happening.
Mhm.
But they have been lowering almost everything, you know, so I would
Absolutely.
assume until they get on a healthier state that that's gonna continue.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt.
Okay. So what do you suggest for next meeting? Contemplate these things? Maybe we'll come up with some ideas and a motion at that meeting? I don't think we'll be,
Is there any further information you want me to gather?
No, but I just wanna make sure I know what we're talking about. We're talking about asset limitations, we're talking about changing the residence,
Mhm.
we're talking about a cap if something happens with the state, and I can't read my own writing.
I mean, the other thing I mentioned earlier was the tax status, that I thought they should be current.
Oh, rentals.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, the
tax
rental,
status.
yeah. I think the rentals,
Yeah. I mean, if it's possible to find out from other towns how they handle the rental, and they may just zero it out like we do too.
Well,
Okay.
for the rest of our town here, we usually require that all the taxes be current before they get permits and anything else.
Right. Mhm.
I don't know.
I may have it in what I've already received. I was looking at the things that were, that I had focused on. You know, there may be in there, in each one's ordinance, there
Mhm.
probably is what they calculate, you know, what they use. Do they put in the rental income? Do they add back
Yep.
in the social security? They may just do it exactly as the state does, only added another tier, which, you know, is something that could be done as well. We could do it exactly like the state does, use the adjusted gross income and call it a day, and everybody's treated the same. We do a lot of
But
extra work, because we're
But if the
adding
state's
in-
picking up the adjusted gross income, then what about the social security? Do you make the adjustment for that still?
The social security gets counted as the full social security.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's not adjusted
But
gross
it's
income,
adjusted
it's a
gross
modified
profit.
adjusted gross income,
Right,
okay.
yeah. So, I mean, in all likelihood, they're probably doing something similar to that, but I will check that, what other towns qualify as income.
And with being current on the tax, I'm hopping on that, but being current on the tax, if somebody's in a program already and they're behind, I would again then maybe grandfather them in.
Do you have a
What-
sense for what the percentage of
I don't think it's,
Right.
it sound,
Right now, I don't have anybody seriously behind right now that's in the program.
And how do you define that, like more than one payment or some timing issues?
No,
What's
I mean,
serious?
well, seriously for me is the ones that I'm gonna put into a tax sale, or the ones that I've called the bank on, or I've called them on, or I've written them letters,
And is that usually a year, 2 years?
No, I don't wait a year. No, I don't wait a year.
So a couple months.
Maybe a quarter, 2 quarters, and then I'm writing them or calling them, because taxes are high and they add up like lightning fast,
and then you get 18% on top of it.
Right, and before you know it, people are really behind the ball. So if I can catch them early and get them on some sort of payment plan with the taxpayer, it's more beneficial for them and it's beneficial for the town as well.
So if you were to just throw a number off the top of your head of the 283 participants, any sense for how many are not current?
Maybe 20,
10%?
Could you give us a dollar amount too?
maybe next time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
Okay, so we
Just to get a feel for it.
dollar amount.
Maybe we don't do anything with it this time around, but maybe there should be a recommendation too, to review this program again in 3 years,
Well, remember, this recommendation came from the Board of Finance.
Yes.
Last year.
But it came because you had mentioned that maybe
Right.
it hasn't been looked at since 2007 or whatever, so.
Correct, yeah. All right, so I need to get the rental income,
Background from
From
the other
towns.
towns.
qualifying income, what they use.
They include in their assets.
Keeping in mind that what I did was I just put an email out to the Tax Collectors Association and said, can you send me your local program?
Right. Mhm.
And then then I did the ones that were in the immediate area. Also keep in mind that most of this work, although it's handled in Bethel by the tax collector's office, is handled by the assessor's office. So probably what I will do maybe is reach out to the Assessors Association and ask them for their information on the same, because they may have more than what I'm getting, because if it's not handled by the tax collector and I get an email in and I read it and I'm busy during my day, I'm like, I don't do that, so I'm not gonna bother, Like New London phased all their programs out. The only reason that's in there because he emailed me and said, we phased everything out except the state program.
Be curious to know why they phased it out.
He just said that it's a city, they're struggling, you get a council, it's easy, his words, you get a council opposed to a selectman or a board of selectmen, it's easy to phase things out because there's, 12 of you to spread the blame among.
So they do it just based on finances, not on
Yeah.
kind of thinking about keeping people in their houses?
I think it depends on who you have on your boards. At that time there, it didn't matter to them about,
Mhm.
the bottom line mattered more than what happened.
Okay.
Okay, I will work on getting, the rental income, the qualifying incomes, and the dollar amount and the number of delinquents we have. you guys think of anything else, you can always call me and I can try to work on it before. And
I would just add to have us think about whether we think it's important for them to be declared as Connecticut residents in Bethel. In other words, if they're gonna show us a tax return, if they file a tax return for federal, do we want to ask that they show us the state return, which is that declaration? In effect, almost an affidavit.
Show that, and then maybe as part of the affidavit, they affirm that they are Connecticut resident.
Right. And then more specifically, a Bethel resident.
Mm-hmm, right, mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, one of the ways that we determine whether they're residents in many cases is to look at their income tax, because sometimes they have different addresses on them, like New York or whatever, but you have to always keep in mind that you're dealing with elderly people and many of their children take care of their business for them. My mother lived in Maine, but all her bills came to me in Connecticut. So all her bills had a Connecticut address on them. So you walk a fine line. Sometimes you know the person, you ask around, you maybe ask questions to try to determine whether someone is trying to do something wrong or not. And there's only like so far that John and I can go, you know. We're not the police, you know. We can deny the benefit if I feel like I have some pretty concrete proof, and I have done that on more than one occasion. A number of occasions we've had to deny the benefit if I'm fairly confident, either by something the person has said, because usually sometimes they'll say, well, I live in Danbury, but I have a house in Bethel, you know, that type of thing. You know. I don't go sneak up on them or anything like that.
Okay, anything else?
I don't think that's-
Anybody in a motion to adjourn?
I motion that we adjourn.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5:05, 5:06? Okay.
It's a tough